So first of all, thanks for being here. Meet up in the middle of the week at 7 p.m. It's really really appreciated. Uh, let oh, no,
Arrow keys not working on my keyboard.
yeah, let's see. That's usually expected.
I clicked it. Oh,
Let's
it's
see. Yeah.
hang on. We need to do it from
No, should be good. Should not. Well, but should be good. This okay now
here.
it
Yeah,
works.
it's working.
Thank you very much. Yep. Okay, so first of all, we are hiring. I had to put a little bit of a pitch in there. Throughout the presentation, you will understand possibly a little bit better who I work for and which kind of company we are. But just to give you a short preview, we do CDN software and caching, and you most likely have heard of Vanish Cache at some point. Yes, very well. We are looking for 3 people in R&D to join us, distributing among Oslo, New York, and in London, we're looking for a UK engineer. And for the London office, we're also looking for salespeople to join us. So if you have any questions, just feel free to either shoot me an email or reach out on Twitter or just have a chat with me later. Now, I think we can actually start with the proper presentation. And I have decided it's a good way to start the presentation with a story. And the story is a quite well-known one. Yeah, I mean, Perry told me no swearing, no political view during the presentation, and the first topic we talk about is actually the First World War. So it's the beginning of the 20th century, and the Archduke of Austria gets killed, and we pretty much know how that ended. That action led to the very first World War we had. And that's pretty much what you will find on every history book, at least in Europe. I'm not sure about the rest of the world. But the story is way more fascinating behind it. Like what's behind it is way, way more fascinating. So it's the 28th of June, 1914, and Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria, is visiting Sarajevo, Serbia. At that time, Serbia was really on the edge of rebellion. Austria was trying to conquering and slowly spreading throughout all that region in Europe, and in Serbia they weren't really happy with what was happening at the time. So for that day, a Serbian group decided it was the perfect day to try to assassinate Franz Ferdinand and revindicate their independence. What you might not know is that there were 6 people on that day. There was a parade, and the Archduke was supposed to be driven throughout the city. That was just a courtesy visit. And 6 different Serbian young guys were distributed among the parade. The first one, as soon as he sees the car with Franz Ferdinand approaching, tries to throw a bomb at it. The bomb bounced back onto the second car and blew that one up. Obviously, the parade gets interrupted. People on the second car are brought to the hospital, and Franz Ferdinand is actually very annoyed by the whole scenario. The other 5 people, the other 5 Serbians, decide just to leave the parade because the assassination just didn't happen that day. Later on that same day, Franz Ferdinand decides to go to the hospital to visit his injured friend, or actually, I think they were part of the army at that time. And by mistake, his driver take a wrong turn. In that street, Gravilo Princip, the, the murderer actually, was just standing outside a cafe enjoying possibly a sandwich after the failed attack. And as soon as he saw Franz Ferdinand on his car, he decided to pull out his gun and just shoot at Franz Ferdinand and his wife. And that's how the First World War actually started. Obviously, way more actions after the death of Franz Ferdinand happened, but that's really pretty much what we got. I have another story for you. That's very more lightweighted than the First World War. It's 2013. We have a young student planning to move to Australia when the student and the studies. But during a party, the student meets a person. They fall in love, and the new graduated student moves to Oslo after like 3 months or so. Turns out I am that student, and that was totally unexpected. Nowadays, I'm living in Italy. I am Italian originally, but I've lived in Oslo for a few years. I'm working as tech evangelist at Varnish Software, where we are CDN and caching, or overall, really content delivery experts. I'm a huge diversity supporter, and that's really pretty much all you need to know about me. And I like stories as well, obviously. I find them very entertaining. So the question for you is, well, why have I started with a couple of stories? Well, first of all, because it's late in the day, and it's really late for everyone, and it's nice to just listen to some stories once in a while. But obviously, there is a reason why I picked those two stories. If you think about it, like those two stories, they both had very clear initial conditions. And at some point, something totally unexpected happened, and the path changed completely. That's what they have in common. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That's a butterfly effect in real life, really. So what's a butterfly effect from a more mathematical point of view? That's a definition you will find on Wikipedia. And just to give you some more context, it was named by Lorenz, a meteorologist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And it was running a few studies around weather forecast. And specifically, it was running a study composed by 12 nonlinear equations. And I think we are pretty much all familiar with what a nonlinear equation is. And at some point during one of his experiments, he decided to round off a few numbers. I mean, you would expect to still get the same result when you have 12 nonlinear equations and you just decided to cut off a few ciphers at the very end of the whole of the number. What happened is that he actually got very different results. And he decided to define this dependence on initial condition as butterfly effect. And he actually came up with a good example, like, can a butterfly flapping its wings, I don't know, in New Mexico, causing a tornado on the other side of the world? We don't really know. We can't really prove it. We can just prove it from a mathematical point of view. But yes, so the question for today is, does it affect tech as well? So given A and B in a deterministic system, we expect to always get C as a result. Instead, we might have a scenario where we are given A and B, and a butterfly flaps its wings, something totally unexpected happens, and then we eventually get to Z. Is this something we observe in tech as well? I think the answer is yes. Unfortunately, I can't prove it. But throughout the years, we had a lot of failed predictions, which at some point could have actually been proper predictions. So in 1977, Ken Olsen said, there is no reason anyone will want a computer in their home. So who has more than a laptop device at home? Yes, that's about 100%. Actually, statistics says 84% in the US. Well, obviously, this room is like a niche in between the world. In 2004, Bill Gates said that in 2 years from now, spam will be solved. So about 54 billion spam emails are sent out every day. Maybe with the upcoming GDPR, well, we don't have time to talk about this. I know it's a huge topic, so I'm not opening that one. 53 and a half. Yes, maybe 50. We will get 53.5 billion. That's a small step towards a solution. And in 2007, Steve Ballmer, the former CEO at Microsoft, said there is no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. No chance. So today, iPhone has about 40% of the market share. That was a totally failed prediction, which could have been true based on what they were observing at the time, actually. So the real question is, what's going on today? I do attend quite a few conferences, and I do talk to analysts as well, and everyone usually tends to share prediction or do a little bit of forecast on what will happen in the tech world in the upcoming years. So just to build some context here, as I told you, we are CDN experts and caching experts. So obviously, I can bring an example which relates to the cloud, to the edge, to a content delivery, really. So first, it was a cloud. This was about, I will say now, 5-7 years. The cloud has been quite popular. And if you think about the cloud, what it tries to solve is basically we're trying to distribute content and trying to be efficient when we distribute content, because we want to have a few storages distributed in strategic locations, and we want to have points of presence as well in other strategic locations. And if we can, we want to avoid maintenance, and we want to have very low cost for everything we do. In the last year or so, the edge came. So what's the edge? The idea behind the edge is to move some of the logic closer or as close as possible to the end user. A very good example for edge computing are driverless cars. Obviously, we need to run some logic within the car itself, and then the car will communicate to the closest points of presence. But really, edge computing is applicable to any other market or any other company. But as you can see, that's way, way more distributed than expected. So edge computing has some upside. We reduce latency, we have better performance overall, we can afford more user personalizations, we possibly have less round trips, and we also consume less bandwidth. In my personal opinion, less bandwidth is the real problem, because that's where the bottleneck is still today. And I've been thinking about cloud computing and edge computing lately. And if you would have talked with me like during the Akamai Edge in October last year in 2017, I would have told you, guys, no way. Edge computing is gonna be the next big revolution. But now I've started wondering whether it's gonna be a revolution for real, as the cloud was. I think we can consider the cloud as a real revolution when it comes to content delivery. And the main question is, do we really want to have a very, very, very distributed system? The answer is no. We don't want to rely on edge computing only. The answer is no, because what's applicable to driverless cars might be useless for e-commerce website or live streaming websites as well, or really anything else. Once we have many devices distributed all over the world, we will have to maintain those, make sure they're fully synchronized. They need to be updated. Like, we still need to use bandwidth. We still have to use round trips. We still have to rely on CDNs or internet providers. So overall, if we just rely on edge computing, that will require way more work for teams. And this obviously led me to think, why should we forecast and try to come up and say what's going to happen in tech in the next 5 years. Does it even make sense? Can't we just plan for a short term? It makes no sense to me if anyone comes and say, I have an architecture which is supposed to last for the next 5 years. It totally makes no sense. Your architecture is supposed to last for the next year, maybe 2 years, no more than that, really. So why can't we try to change approach in our everyday life and try to apply small changes to our infrastructure, architecture, the logic we want to implement, small changes just to stay up to date and try to serve the way we have at the moment without doing really any forecast at all. But obviously, I've been thinking about the cloud and edge computing. And this slide, I know you're probably thinking, well, now she's going and say what's going to happen in the next year or so. No, I think in the next 3 months, maybe 6, the edge computing won't hit the cloud. But I honestly believe edge computing and cloud computing at some point will find a very good balance to provide even better web performance and content delivery solutions. That's where we're actually trying to work towards too. And I really, really hope to see many more companies coming up with edge and cloud computing solution combined together, trying to make their end users happy, and also coming up with an infrastructure and a solution which is totally can be maintained by small teams, really. So no, again, edge computing won't hit the cloud. Just stay focused on cloud computing, make it work properly, and then eventually think about moving some of the logic closer to your end users. But unless you are Tesla, and I think I can say this, unless you're Tesla and you have tons of driverless cars, that's something you won't really be hit terribly by. So at this point, I really hope you have questions and objections, because like saying edge computing won't really hit the cloud alive is kind of a strong statement, given that everyone else is saying edge computing is the next big thing, and just forget about the cloud. Are you just shocked by this revelation? Or...
Any questions?
Yes.
What is edge computing?
What's edge computing? So by definition, edge computing is really, just to give you an example, think about a Tesla car. Like, if you fall asleep in a Tesla, most likely you won't die. That's because it has happened. But the idea is that you're supposed to survive. Yeah. Don't get political here. Yeah. So the car, some of the logic will have to be run by the car itself, and then the result of this logic will be shuffled or be reported to one of the different points of presence Tesla has all over the world. They will eventually collect and monitor data out of it, and each of the data center will reply back immediately to the car. So the idea behind it is that you want to have some of the logic run by the car itself, because you need to optimize the time, the response time. Like even 0.0001 milliseconds could actually make a difference between living and surviving. So another example, we can define edge computing as well. Really any scripts running on your mobile phone as well. So if you have a script running on your mobile phone, and this script comes up with a few results, and it then decides to send the results to one of the origin servers or one of the points of presence of a specific company, and based on the results your phone has sent to the point of presence, you will get eventually advertisement most likely, or really any other suggestion. And that's used for user personalization. But that's really, I mean, it's defined as edge computing, but it's borderline with cloud computing as well. Because if you receive an advertisement after 1 second, it won't really make any difference when it comes to living or dying, really. And the edge computing is applicable to the Internet of Things as well. So anything running within the device itself, any logic run by the device itself, can be considered at some extent edge computing. There are a lot of, if you Google for it, really, there are a lot of different definitions. At some point, I think in San Francisco, they also had the fog computing. But yeah, it happened for real. But like, and that was supposed to be the next big thing after cloud computing, because you have the cloud, you have fog, and I'm not quite sure how they came up with the edge naming part.
Maybe that's a side reference to the old adventure game called Myst, but I don't know. Right, any more questions? No, not at all. Anyway, well, so let's thanks Arianna for her talk. Thank you.